This episode of Positively Trek is brought to you by our supporters on Patreon, including Jim Stoffel, Joyce Marin, Carl Morris, and associate producer William Smith. Visit patreon.com/positivelytrek to help support the podcast. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, shout-outs, associate producer credits, and more. Thank you for your support, and keep trekking.
Captain's log, April the 5th, 2063. The voyage of the Phoenix was a success. Again. The alien ship detected the warp signature and is on its way to rendezvous with history.
Well, folks, we did it. 100 episodes of the Positively Trek podcast. After a little over a year, we're in the triple digits, and I'm so excited to be sitting here recording the 100th episode with my partner in crime, Bruce Gibson. Bruce, how are you celebrating our 100th episode today?
By being on it. That's how I'm celebrating.
Excellent.
Yeah, that and First Contact Day. It's two celebrations.
Absolutely. So, yeah, this was kind of a pure coincidence. First Contact Day falls on the same week that we have our 100th episode. So we're releasing this episode a day early on April the 5th, the actual First Contact Day. And we thought it would be fun to talk about Star Trek First Contact, which, by the way, and this kind of shocked me when I did the math here, is 25 years old this year. So we thought it would be fun to kind of talk about that film. We didn't want to do it alone, though, so we're bringing in another Trek expert to talk about the film. So everyone, please welcome Damien Devlin, the Irish Trekkie of YouTube. Damien, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on this monumentous occasion. First Contact and 100th episode. Oh, thanks for having me. Hello, everybody.
Damien, you're someone we have a list of people we want to have on the show over the course of our run, and you've been on that list for quite a while. So I'm really happy to finally get the chance to have you on.
It just took us 100 episodes to get to
you. Well, listen, good things come to those who wait. So I'm so happy to be here to talk to you both on this awesome sunny day, and what a day it is.
Excellent. And yeah, we're kind of a world sprawling podcast today because I'm, of course, coming to you from Alberta, Canada. We have Bruce in Atlanta, Georgia, and you're all the way, of course, in Ireland.
International time zones and all the fun that comes with that as well. So yeah, global podcast. Yay!
Well, for our listeners who may not know of you or maybe haven't heard of what it is you do, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do as far as your YouTube channel and any other kind of Star Trek projects that you do?
So, thanks for the opportunity to talk to your fans and listeners. I suppose in a nutshell, I'm an adult that plays with toys in the best possible way. You mentioned the word Trek expert there. Yeah, potentially. I have some knowledge that could be useful in today's podcast, but I'm a huge sci-fi enthusiast, and I just love everything about the technology and starships in general. And for the most part, you'll see my hands playing with models of Star Trek starships and other sci-fi franchises, and just celebrating the sheer joy of imagination and wonder about the world of what could be. And outside of YouTube, you will find me in the Nerd Escape podcast, where I co-host again some Trek and sci-fi talk with my friends, the Trek Collector and Hen in a Hat, and just pottering around, talking about Trek and other cool sci-fi shows that we get to enjoy in the past few years as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's how I first got introduced to you, was your reviews, of course, of the Eagle Moss models, which I love. I have a ton, nowhere near your collection, but I really enjoy your reviews of those ships.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I have that first world problem now of where to put the collection. It's absolutely, it's like no other out there. A Hero Collector Eagle Moss have just, when they came onto the scene in 2013, which is when I started YouTube shenanigans as well, being able to hold the ship of the week from your favorite episode, or just kind of fall into the lore. It's been amazing, and I've really enjoyed every single video, and the fringe benefit of meeting amazing people like yourselves and many others through the years doing this as well, and just sharing in the fun, and the beauty about it, like you mentioned it there, Canada, America, Ireland, it doesn't matter where you're from now. You can just get to talk to people from wherever at any time of the day and just, talk Trek. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Because before the internet, I really didn't have many people to talk Trek with at all. And now I've got all kinds of people, including yourself, that I can talk Trek with. And I mean, I don't have the collections like you have with these ships. I mean, how many ships do you have and where do you keep them all?
Yeah. It'd be, wow. I don't have the official number off the top of my head, but it's definitely well past 200. So I do have a lot of them out. I have some nice display cabinets that were purchased from a supermarket chain over here called Lidl, German chain. And they're specific display cabinets, but IKEA have been a favorite for a lot of collectors out there, the Detolf and stuff like that as well. Here, we're going into furniture talk here now, aren't we? But for the most part, I do keep most of my collections in my kind of office / kind of fun zone. And I have been able to sneak one special one into the sitting room because, I'm more the enthusiast in my household. I'm training the kids, but, trying to get around my wife is a challenge. So I did have one snuck into the sitting room as well, which is great.
So how did that happen? How did you address that with your wife to get permission to have that one item out in the sitting room?
Well, I came at it tactically. I was kind of, I'll tell you what the ship is. Actually, Dan, you have seen some of my videos as well. What would you think would be the ship that would sit in potentially a sitting room? Just to put you on the spot there.
I feel like I'm going to be pretty unimaginative, and I'm thinking it's an Enterprise of some kind, but I'm not sure.
I'm going to guess Titan.
Two very good. Like, obviously, yeah, the Enterprise is always a good mix, and the Titan is, oh man, what a wicked ship. And you know what? Like, Lower Decks, man, did that ship justice, I tell you. That's another story.
Oh, yeah.
But the ship that I got in there, it's a personal favorite of mine, and it's a bit of a divisive ship, but it's actually the USS Discovery, believe it or not. It's the XL version. And the way I got around it was the kind of almost Art Deco vibes that come off that ship. And it's just long and slender, and the color tone on it as well. So, I love the ship anyway, but I kind of used it as a bit of an art piece. And it worked. So I have the XL Discovery on display in the sitting room. So it's at a glance. It's my little bit of Trek downstairs. So it's good. And some of them are unboxed as well. So, but I'd love to get them all on display at some stage.
Yeah, mine are kind of all about the room in a bit of disarray. So I think I might need to clean up my collection at some point and figure out exactly how I want it to be. There are so many of them for sure. I do have a bit, my wife is huge into Star Wars. She's a big Star Wars fan. So she's got all kinds of Admiral Akbars all over the main living room as well. So I get a little bit of space there as a compromise. We kind of share that half and half.
Yeah, I don't have that fortunate stance right now because my wife, she's supportive and she likes Star Trek and Star Wars and things like that, but she doesn't really want them displayed in the house. I don't think I have anything out in the general area. She allows me to put a few things on my bathroom sink, and then every once in a while, if I sit something out, she says, well, you're not keeping it there, are you? You have a room.
I get that too, a lot.
It goes into the room.
Absolutely. Well, we want to definitely thank you for being on this show, this special show, of course, because today, if you're listening to this when the episode comes out, it is First Contact Day, and there's no shortage of Star Trek events. We, of course, have Star Trek Day in September with all these panels and stuff, and they've decided to repeat that again for First Contact Day, which is pretty interesting. So happening all day today, and probably in the past by the time you're listening to this, 6 different panels that are going to be streamed live for First Contact Day, including one that I'm really excited about, a Star Trek Prodigy panel, which caps off the end of the day. So there's probably going to be some news coming out there that we are unable to share because it's still in our future. But yeah, it's a big day of celebration. It's really, really awesome to see them kind of embracing this as a special day for Star Trek. So we're, of course, recording this, like I said, a few days beforehand. So question to the two of you, do you plan on trying to catch any of these panels when they come out?
Well, that's going to be a little difficult for me during work, but I might be able to sneak them in playing in the background. But I'm sure they'll be on YouTube to rewatch later or something. But it looks like for at least my time zone, I could probably get the 5 and 5:30 p.m. in. But the others, we'll just have to see.
They will be on the Paramount Plus YouTube channel afterwards, apparently, according to this. So we can retroactively catch them.
Which is awesome for accessibility, you know, because I'd be like Bruce as well. If I could catch them, I definitely would. But it's nice to be able to sit back in your own time and catch up on a panel, because it's nice reading news, especially like with Prodigy. But there's again a certain nicety of watching the panel and how people are interacting and what they're talking about as well. You get a little bit of extra kind of special sauce with it as well.
Especially with Prodigy, because I'm with you, Dan. Like, I'm really excited about that one. Hopefully we get something new from this, or a date or something. I'd love to. That's the one I would want to watch live, because Damien, like you're saying, it's like all of a sudden, people are going to be talking online and you can interact with people during the panel. Since it's 5:30 p.m., I stand a good chance of joining that one live.
The other big panel, of course, is the first one, which is only labeled Special Presentation, saying that it begins with a special announcement and presentation by Patrick Stewart with details yet to be revealed. So I'm curious about that one as well, if it has anything to do with Picard Season 2 or something like that. They're being really cagey about that. But yeah, that and the Prodigy panel, I'm definitely most interested about.
Because Patrick Stewart's just going to say, "We started production."
That's probably
we
it.
already know.
He could be announcing like, an unplugged concert. The flute is returning. You never know. There's a lot of options out there, but yeah, probably Picard too.
I like it. The Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra concert. That's the announcement.
Oh man, I'd love that soundtrack.
Excellent. Well, yeah. So hopefully we get some interesting news out of that. We'll definitely be sharing all of that in next week's episode. But for this week's episode, because it's First Contact Day, we thought it might be fun to revisit that film, which again, like I said, is 25 years old. And I'm going to keep saying that because it just blows my mind every time. I think that I remember watching it in the theater and just loving it as, a fairly young person at the time. And it just blows my mind that it's a quarter century later we're talking about this film now. So today, of course, being April the 5th, is the negative 42nd anniversary of First Contact between Earth and the Vulcans. I was wondering, have the two of you gotten out your First Contact Day salmons yet? Have you grilled that up for in celebration of the day?
No.
Yeah, no, not yet.
Definitely on the list. I love that it's just like a throwaway line, of course, from Lower Decks, but I think that's a great tradition. Like, I like salmon. Let's make it a thing. I think that's cool.
Yeah, I might do that. Now that you mention it, sure, why not?
Maybe like a Borg burger or something be more up my street, but, market in your own special way. Let us know.
Absolutely. So to the two of you, did you rewatch First Contact recently? Or if not, when was the last time you saw the film? Damien, when did you last watch First Contact?
Well, I'll tell you, it's one of the things I wanted to thank you about, because I like to do a little bit of research when I come onto a podcast, if possible. And I've just recently rewatched it, and it has stood the test of time. As you said, 25 years ago. It makes me feel old now. We'll get into the meat and veg of it a little bit later on, but it's still such an awesome movie.
Yeah, I rewatched it last night. Snuck it in. I saw it was on Paramount Plus. I was going to watch the Blu-ray, but I was telling Dan before the show, like, every Blu-ray TV that had a Blu-ray player connected was being used or whatever. So I couldn't use it last night with the family, but I was able to watch it on my phone on Paramount Plus. So there's a thumbs up to Paramount Plus for having it there.
Yeah, I rewatched it last night as well. I decided to watch it with the director's commentary, so Jonathan Frakes' commentary, because I've seen that movie so many times. Like, I can absolutely say the lines along with the actors at this point, because that movie is so burned in my brain. It just hit at the perfect time when I was younger, and it has so just been such an influential Star Trek film, and one that I've absolutely loved. So it was really fun to be able to revisit it. To your point, Damien, it absolutely stands the test of time. It really, really holds up well. It's kind of crazy to think it was 1996 that it came out.
I remember watching it yesterday, and I was like that now. I know the story, I know the cues and stuff like that. So I was kind of paying special attention to some of the details and just like the overall feel and like the lighting and the music and just like the set dressings and stuff like that. I was like, oh, it's such quality. And just the little micro actions of the cast and crew is just, yeah, it's such a pleasure to return and rewatch that movie.
And when I was watching it, I thought about how it was in 96, and I thought, this is less than 20 years after the motion picture. And I thought, how many, that was 8 movies in less than 20 years. And we haven't had that since, I mean, in the last 20 years, we've had, 4? I just thinking, like, it's come a long way from the motion picture all the way to First Contact. And I agree with you guys. It definitely holds up. It's a fun movie to watch. It really is, even to this day. And it's been a while since I watched it. And I mean, yeah, I've seen it so many times, but it's been a while. And after all this time to watch it again, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's an interesting film because it's, part action adventure, but it's kind of also Star Trek doing horror for the first time a little bit as well, which analyzing it from that perspective this time around and really looking at some of those choices, and you can really see the influences from big horror movies and action adventure movies as well. And I think they crafted something really great.
And it's a nice balance in tone, because I mean, if it was all just this stuff going on with the Borg and it was all that horror thing, I don't think I'd like the movie as much. But because you have those kinds of horror scenes and it's intense and all these things are going on, and then it goes back down to earth with Cochrane and all the things that are going on there, and then you kind of have a breather and you have a lighter moment. So it's a perfect balance to give it the tone throughout, that's some horror, some fun, and it works. It works tremendously.
The super clever move of almost splitting the story between Earth and the Enterprise and splitting the crew up gave you the kind of time to like tension and relax as well, for sure. So 100% agree on that.
Yeah, it's actually funny both of you bring that up, because that was something that Jonathan Frakes highlighted in the commentary, is, kind of that building of that suspense and that kind of twisting your guts, and then that release. And basically it's so you can experience that twisting up and revving up again. The movie kind of does that over and over again, which, really contributes to the enjoyment of watching it, for sure. I kind of want to pop back in time 25 years ago and ask about if you guys remember watching it the first time, and maybe like the anticipation of it. What was your kind of memories of seeing it, if you kind of remember the build up and seeing it in the theater and that sort of thing?
I really don't remember what I mean, I know I liked it. I just don't remember my initial feelings when I saw it. I remember the build up and thinking, okay, the Borg on the big screen. Oh my gosh, this could be so good. And also know Zemford Cochrane's going to be it. It was just knowing those two elements of it, I got really excited about it. I do remember where I saw it. I think a friend of mine went with me who was not a Trekker at all. I mean, he knew Star Trek and kind of liked it, but he wasn't like a big fan of it. But he went with me. I remember him really enjoying it too. So, but yeah, I don't remember I don't remember the coming out of the theater and what my feelings were. I don't remember that piece, which I hate, because I remember that on so many others, but this one I don't.
I sometimes have not the best memory, but on this occasion, I do have some very vivid memories about First Contact, because back when it was released, I was 14, 15. So, like, I remember on the lead up to it, we knew the Enterprise D went its merry way, unfortunately. Great movie, Generations. But, the hype of, like, a new ship coming. And I remember, like, before, like, the internet was really kind of kicking off over here, printing off pictures from, I think it was like a Hollywood magazine, something like that, and it was showing clips of the bridge. And just, I had one friend that was liked Star Trek in school, and the two of us were kind of like printing off pages in my uncle's office and kind of going, oh, this is gonna be so cool. But I do remember watching it in the cinema and coming out going, that was friggin' awesome, because it was like watching Like I grew like TNG was my gateway to Trek. I've always liked the classic movies. I say classic, like, you know, there weren't that far between the two. But when TNG crew transitioned to the big screen, I've always loved their movies. And like First Contact though was just like, I remember just thinking, oh, that was nuts. So much to talk about. And yeah, it was awesome.
It's funny because that recollection very much matches my own. I was 14 when it came out as well, and kind of an interesting coincidence there. And I remember there was a social studies class that I was in, and we had to like make this little time capsule at the start of the year that we were going to open at the end of the year. And I distinctly remember our local newspaper, the Grand Prairie Daily Herald Tribune, had like a story about First Contact coming out, and there's a little black and white photo from the movie, and I cut that out because I was like, oh my gosh, you know, local newspaper talking about Star Trek. And I was so excited about this movie, I put that in the little time capsule thing. As like 13-year-old me at the time, because my birthday was right around the same time, was thinking like, wow, when I open this, I'll have seen Star Trek First Contact. Like that's how excited I was about the movie at the time. And even the advertising is burned on my brain. I still remember on November 22nd, resistance is futile, all the time, as like these ad breaks in between shows and stuff. And I was so pumped for this movie. It just came at the perfect time for young me to be so totally hyped about it.
I love how you guys are young yous during this time, and I was 29, and after the movie we went out for drinks.
So I can guarantee you then, with the kind of age difference there, you would have potentially had a different perspective on the movie versus, you know, the two of us kind of be probably super green, you know, because like looking back, watching it now as an adult as well, you know, you do pick up on the tension and like the relationships more, and like the shift. I think this is one of the best representations of the Borg. I've always wanted the Borg to be something that would kind of send a shiver down your spine, and I loved what they did with the Borg in Voyager, but I felt that it was a bit TV-ified. So like the kind of horror aspects, and you know, the monolithic, you know, the cube and Picard, you'd be doing them a favor if you end their lives and stuff like that. I loved that kind of horror aspect too, because they are petrifying things when you think about it. Like humanity's at stake, the future's at stake, and yeah, pretty cool ride though at the time.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one thing I noticed too this time around in high definition as well, is how much of that just holds up so well. Like the Borg makeup for one thing, and Jonathan Frakes got into this a little bit with the commentary about how there were different makeup artists in charge of different groups of Borg, so that there was enough variation. Like none of them were exactly the same as another one. And in high definition, yeah, it really, really holds up. There's some really horrific makeups there where like the lips and stuff on this one particular one were like kind of cracked and peeling away, like really almost zombie like at that point, where I was really amazed with some of that stuff.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the makeup and the style of the costumes, because they had come a long way since the TNG TV series with those costumes. And I did watch a little bit of one of the special features, and I remember them saying they only had 8 Borg costumes, but they made it seem as if there were hundreds of Borg, but they only had 8 costumes that they were using. And they reused all those costumes for Voyager, they said.
Yeah, the amount of work that goes into this, and just the team of people that came together is really incredible, and set design and the writing, the performances, I think are all just terrific. One thing I wanted to kind of bring up is, you know, in a little bit of coincidental news here, I recently learned John Eaves, who of course is the designer of the Enterprise E and many, many other things in Star Trek. He's even worked on Discovery and designed the Shenzhou and all of that, is going to be honored with an Art Directors Guild Lifetime Achievement Award. So just kind of, you know, just the sheer scale of expertise that's behind this film, and John Eaves just being one example of that. I think it really shows the minds that came together to create this film.
100%. You know, it takes a village.
I always liked the E, except I always felt that the E looked like it was designed for this movie. I mean, which it was. But then it seems a bit out of place when I watch the other movies because, like, you can see all the little life pods on there that they use for the movie, but you can see it in the design of the ship at all the time. And it looks like it's a ship built to fight the Borg, which, and essentially, it kind of is. But again, loving the look of the E at the same time, it always stands out to me as it looks like that because of the Borg, because of this movie. I didn't feel like it was a ship that was designed for future movies. It was really designed for this movie.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. But yeah, it does seem like a sleek, fighting type ship, which is, not really the norm for Star Trek. But I don't know. I feel like it fit in well with the later films as well. I think of the TNG films, this is by far my favorite. And we'll always have that place there. So, but yeah, I think it worked okay in the other films, but it wasn't maybe used to the same potential that it was here. Like this film, we really get into the guts of the ship more so than we really see in any of the other movies.
True. And I remember talking to, and because I've had the huge honor of talking to John about the Enterprise E. And one thing that I never thought about with it, because it was designed for this movie 100%, because there was the talk, and there's images out there if you Google it, that the decal Enterprise E was put on a Galaxy class ship, and it was going to be another Galaxy class until the powers that be said, let's go with a different design. Because this ship was born on the big screen, they took advantage of the widescreen format versus the 4:3 format that the Enterprise D was born into. And if you look at the Excelsior way back when, that has some of the same elements that the Enterprise E has, the long, sexy lines and the long nacelles and stuff like that as well. But it's one of these ships, though, that goes through a lot of evolutions because the ship varies from movie to movie after this. So in Insurrections and Nemesis, it doesn't kind of stay true to itself, but it is one of my favorite Federation ships out there. And she looks lovely on, like, coming in to the fleet action, in between the Cube and the Defiant, and it's quantum torpedo volleys shot. And yes, tasty. That's the shippy in me there.
I like what you're saying about the Galaxy class ship, because I remember at the time this movie, well, actually when Generations came out and the Enterprise D crashed and burned, I was thinking, okay, if they do another movie, it's going to be an Enterprise E. I hope they don't do what they did in The Voyage Home and just recreate the Galaxy D to look, and it just says E on it. Like, I wanted it to look different. I wanted it to be a different ship. And it's funny that they were considering keeping the same look. I'm glad that they decided to move forward with a different type of ship. That's cool.
Well, one of the things that I love about this movie is it's definitely a Star Trek film through and through, but there are very clear efforts, and in a lot of ways I think it succeeds in bringing kind of the general public into Star Trek. And Bruce, you were talking about your friend who wasn't necessarily a Trekkie but still really enjoyed the film. I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of our favorite parts, and one of my favorite parts is it's kind of subtle, but once you notice it, it's really hilarious. In this kind of effort to bring the non-Trekkies on board with the story, the most clear example of that is near the beginning of the film when they're chasing the Borg sphere and it starts opening up the temporal vortex to go back in time. Data says the sphere's emanating chronometric particles, and us Star Trek fans are like, oh, chronometric, that's time travel. And then Picard stands up and he says, they're opening a temporal vortex. Now you've brought about, half of the remaining viewers on board because temporal, time travel. But then Riker stands up and says, time travel, like just to get everybody on board. And I love that. Like they just spell it right out and it's perfect.
He's like, for those of you watching, don't know what we're talking about, it's time travel. I'm the director here, so I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that here in the audience. Okay, we good to go? Let's continue.
Exactly. I love that. I kind of grin every time I see that.
Time travel. Yeah. That's awesome. And to kind of continue that same vibe as well, like that's what I thought with the character of Lily. Like Lily was the general public because you had so many conversations about, who are the Borg? We don't have money in the future anymore and we're kind of altruistic and awesome and stuff like that. So she was kind of like the gateway character for the person that you might have been bringing to the cinema with you as well, to kind of give you some of these narrative explanations as well. So
yeah, because the whole time Lily's just taking everything in and reacting as like, what is this? And who are you? And this is amazing. And all these things are going on. I love every scene with Lily and Picard. Those are probably my favorite scenes. It's just the two of those characters together. Their performances are so strong. And I love how he's, the captain of the Enterprise, and he's helping this person, as you're saying, Damien, like the audience come in and say, hey, everything's okay, and let me show you around. And I would love, almost in a way, to just go on a tour of the Enterprise with Picard taking us through every place of the Enterprise and giving us a whole tour of this is this, look, you can do this. That would be cool. Not as like a movie, but just a tour of the ship by the Picard himself.
Yeah, it's a great point about Picard and Lily. Like those two together on screen, even in the quiet moments, they're just two incredible actors doing this really amazing work. And of course, which brings us one of the, I think probably the best acted scene in all of Star Trek history, which is of course the scene in the observation lounge, the line must be drawn here, that famous scene. And it's one that you just kind of, it's there and it can be parodied and people make fun of it and stuff. But you watch that scene and just really watch that scene. Those performances are absolutely incredible by both of those actors, and they're feeding each other great stuff and working off of each other just brilliantly. And to hear Jonathan Frakes on that director's commentary talk about that scene and how just he talks about it being the best thing he's ever been involved in helping create, and you can hear the pride in his voice. That scene is so incredible.
I bet he had no idea that scene would play as well as it did. It's like, I bet he thought, oh, this is going to be really good, but once it happened, I think he was probably just smiling. I was like, oh, this is damn good.
This is gold.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, and the metaphors and all of that, like the writing is incredible, but of course what really elevates it are those performances for sure.
But again, it's that blend of, like we're saying, there's times you can breathe and sometimes you're on the edge of your seat, but just with these two characters in that scene, it's so intense. But then earlier there's a scene in the holodeck where, it's a Dixon Hill and they're dancing and all this. And it's kind of a fun scene in a sense, for a little while until Picard starts going off and shooting the Borg. But I also like that scene too, because at the time I saw that, I just thought, this is so great. I never thought I would see Borg walking around in a Dixon Hill hologram. I mean, it's just so cool.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film. And like those moments, those kind of weird moments where you're like, wait, now we're in a, 40s club here with the Borg, and it's definitely strange, and it does release that tension like we were talking about earlier for sure.
I mean, it could have been a really fun, even more fun and funny scene, but the way that scene builds to what happens later in it, it's good they didn't go too funny with it, because you could have done something where, a woman's running up to one of the Borg, oh, dance with me, and tries to dance with the Borg. Yeah, like there could have been all kinds of weird, funny things going on, and it just would have been too over the top. So it was just funny enough just to see the Borg there,
Mm-hmm.
and just that they're using the holodeck to hide from the Borg and then order to attack them then.
And of course, the way that scene ends is much heavier than when it begins, with Picard gunning down the Borg and getting caught up in that moment and obviously kind of losing himself a little bit. And we see this Borg that he's killed is Ensign Lynch. And that moment where Picard's kind of oblivious to Lily's reaction when she says, my God, Jean-Luc, it's one of your uniforms. He says, yes, this was Ensign Lynch. And he's just behind him like, tough luck, huh? And that scene is chilling because of how far Picard has gone, and like seeing it through the eyes of someone who's just, kind of objectively looking at this and coming to it for the first time. You see how brutal that is and how far gone Jean-Luc is even at this point. Just as a little side note, the little comm badge too that you see there, I didn't notice this before, but in HD you can see there's little like Borg wires, like little tiny things kind of etched onto it, and apparently it was a Borgified communicator, and the cast and crew got little Borgified communicators as like little parting gifts for the film. That's cool. I would love to see one of those.
So cool. But I loved that was one of the kind of takeaways I suppose, kind of looking at First Contact later on in life, about, you know, how broken he was from his encounter with the Borg in Locutus. Because one of my beefs, I suppose, looking back at Star Trek is you see some of the crew going through horrendous things. Like, everyone has, like, LaForge on the planet with the Romulans, and like O'Brien going to prison and stuff like that. And they have these huge traumas next week on Star Trek, and everyone seems to be cured, you know, and but not the case here, and that feeds into Picard as well. But you know, he's come through the Borg, and he has survived the Borg, but he'd rather put one of his own crew out of their misery instead of rehabilitating them if they have the option to do that. And it's just shown the kind of, as you say, the struggle since his last encounter with them. It's just very interesting to watch that come to be on the screen. Great acting by Patrick Stewart.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that thought occurred to me when I was watching the movie, because this is the first time I've watched it now since Star Trek Picard has come out. And it reminded me of Star Trek Picard in the fact that the Picard we see and what he's going through in First Contact is not exactly the Picard that you would know and love from the original series, because of what he's been through with the Borg and how that has changed him. And of course, then we get to Star Trek Picard, and it's later in life and the things he's dealt with. And so it's always where we're seeing Picard go down a road where he usually doesn't go, but then he steers himself back, you know? And it's like, I felt that in First Contact, and I felt that in Star Trek Picard. And that thought occurred to me as I was watching the movie.
Yeah, it's interesting when interesting choices are made for characters. I feel like the temptation would be to play it safe and give everybody what they think they want to see, right? The regular old Picard on a merry old adventure. But no, they take the characters to some really interesting places, both here and in Star Trek Picard, as you said. And I think that really strengthens the material, where a character can have flaws. A character can be allowed to show their humanity in ways that some characters and some writers would be maybe hesitant to go to these places. But I really love that they take that plunge here, and they're brave enough to do that here. So I want to talk to you guys about maybe some of your favorite parts of this movie that we haven't mentioned so far. I know for me, it's always a bit of a thrill to see Robert Picardo as the EMH show up. Like, that's kind of fun. What are some kind of fun moments that the two of you enjoyed in this movie that kind of made you go, oh yeah, or I really like that? I
love Drunk Troy. You know,
yes,
I really like. I totally, as I said earlier, we all know the scenes from having watched it more than once for sure. But like, watching it recently, I was just there going, that was just so spot on. That scene with Zephyr and Troy, and then Riker, and then the Roy Orbison singing, and the head drop, and I was just like, I just loved that scene. You know, so good, so very good.
I love that scene. If you watch it multiple times and you watch Riker the entire scene and just all of his reactions to everything going on, that is just the funniest thing. And then keeping in mind that he's also directing the scene. I think it's just hilarious.
I think we've all been in a situation where you may have been the most sober person at a party. And then, you know, when her head drops and he just like looks off screen, and it just, you can kind of hear the, you know, it's like, I loved it. It's so good.
That's funny you guys mentioned those, because when Dan, you started off saying, like, let's talk about some of our other favorite scenes, the first thing came to mind was the EMH and then the Drunk Troy, and you both have mentioned that.
Snap.
I think I also like the scenes where they're chasing Zephyr and Cochrane around. He's trying to go pee, and he's trying to run away from them. I kind of enjoy that in a sense. But I think one of the things, and this isn't a particular scene, but one thing that really stood out to me watching this film last night was how much each character of this cast does get to play. You know, it's, I mean, some, of course, more than others, but I was just very impressed that I felt that every character had a purpose and always had something to do. And not just our main cast, also from the EMH, and also to Barclay, we got him, and even Hawk, you know, we got lots of him, even though this is his only film. And so I felt like we were really getting to touch on different characters that we've seen throughout. So even Agawa, Nurse Agawa was on there too.
And I suppose, like, kind of one of the things that kind of stood out to me as well, because we got much screen time. Like, obviously we have Worf coming back in to First Contact as well, and I loved that whole setup and his interactions later on in the movie. But I must say, for the first time ever, I felt very sad for the tactical officer on the Enterprise that just got shunned away when, Worf, we could use your help on tactical. And it's like, you have a fully commissioned officer there, and you're just kind of going, yeah, we've got our old guy back, bye-bye. It's like,
yeah,
oh, that guy, that's a Lower Decks episode for sure, has to be.
I always think of that too. Every time I see it, I'm like, oh, the poor security guy is probably like, oh, well,
this
Worf's
is
here.
my job.
Yeah.
You left, man. Yeah.
I am really glad they got Worf in the film. And of course, he shows up in all the other TNG films afterwards as well. I feel like not as well explained as it is here. Like in Insurrection, they bring him in and they just kind of start to explain why he's there and trail off as the camera finds another scene. And in Nemesis, he's just there. Like, there's no explanation. He's just back on the Enterprise now, I guess. But yeah, here we get the Defiant meeting the Borg cube with the fleet and engaging it, and that makes perfect sense that the Defiant was designed to fight the Borg. Deep Space Nine would send the Defiant and Worf would be in command. Like, that was perfect. And he really does add so much to this film. And I'm thinking specifically of the scenes, I should say, between him and Picard towards the end of the film. Incredibly acted and used in trailers all over. If you were any other man, I would kill you where you stand. Like, this is just such a great scene.
I remember the Defiant on the big screen. I was so excited at that time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just like, we've all been watching our little TVs at home on Deep Space Nine, and then all of a sudden you're in the theater there, and it's like in this big screen, and there's the Defiant. I was like, yes, and it's fighting the Borg. Oh, and Worf is the captain. Who's that other guy on the ship? I don't know, but wow, look.
I love how he just ignored Worf's like ramming speed. Sir, there's another ship coming on sensors. It's like, I don't want to do that. Yeah.
I always want to see that scene when, like, it's not the Enterprise. Like, sir, there's another starship coming in. It's the Lexington. Okay, why are you telling me?
Yeah.
But no, it's the Enterprise.
But just a question to you both, because I always hate picking holes in movies and stuff like that, but we get the reason why the Enterprise is not being brought into the fleet action, because of the unstable element of the captain. However, the Enterprise is the flagship of the fleet with the flagship crew. Realistically, wouldn't it have made more sense to say, Picard, would you mind sitting this out in the holodeck and maybe giving Riker the seat for just like a half an hour? Because we could do with your quantum torpedoes and all that jazz. But like, listen, I was just thinking about that when I was watching the last time going, yeah, but like for the story, I know why it was done.
No, that's a good point. And yeah, it's funny if you really critically analyze this film, how many strange little plot holes there are. And I'm not a fan of the guy, but Red Letter Media did a famous takedown of First Contact a few years ago, and he does make some really good points. There's one aspect of this film where there's a lot of plot holes that are filled with one line of dialogue, and it kind of moves past it really quickly so that you don't have time to think about it. But if you stop and think about it, it makes very little sense. And one of them, for example, is Picard saying, we can't get to the transporter room or a shuttlecraft. Oh, Mr. Worf, how's your zero-G combat training? If you look at the Enterprise E, the shuttle bay is right behind the bridge, and the Borg are down on deck 14, 15, whatever. But Picard just really quickly says, oh, we can't get to a shuttlecraft. Oh, blah, blah, blah. So you don't think about it. But that's one that always sticks out to me, that I'm like, hey, it's right there. It's like one floor down.
You ruined it for me. I can't watch that part again the same way. Yeah, I think that's the thing about, fans like us, because we watch these so much and we know so much about the whole franchise and all the different stories and where things are, that we can just pick it all apart. But, the majority of people watching these wouldn't even pick up probably on any of this,
No,
and the people
exactly.
making the films know it, they're just like, we can get away with just whatever, the nitpicky fans will yell and scream, but
it's a narrative device. Move on. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I always thought it was interesting too that they don't want the Enterprise to come because Picard's the captain. And it's like, but this ship looks like it's built to fight Borg. And who better to fight Borg than somebody who knows where the Borg's weaknesses would be? But I can understand that maybe there's this trust factor of, well, how do we know Picard will really fight for us? Will he be tempted by the Borg? I get it, but then I like your point, like just take Picard off the ship and have Riker bring it in.
Like he did the last time, you know, when Locutus came on board as well. We wouldn't have had a movie then, really, would we? You know, it's the narrative. And there's one scene that kind of jumps out in my mind as well, just because we're kind of on this topic, is when the Enterprise enters the fleet action and Picard hears the whispers and he finds this, you know, critical zone. And you cut to the view screen, right? And there's that dramatic pause because obviously we're watching a movie. But at least 2 ships get destroyed in that pause. And I'm like, just fire your freaking quantum torpedoes because like 200 people just died in front of you there. Like, you know, I was like, I feel so sorry for those ships. But anyway.
The one that always gets to me too during that same scene was when the Enterprise first arrives. They say, you know, like, oh, the Defiance losing life support. Bridge to transporter room, beam the Defiant survivors aboard. And then in the next breath, Riker says, oh, the Admiral's ship's been destroyed. Couldn't you have been saving the Admiral instead? Oh, the Defiant, one of our friends is on there.
That's so funny because I don't remember this. It's, you know, when you watch a movie so many times and then one time you watch it and you pick up on something you didn't before. This is the first time I think I've ever picked up on the fact that the Admiral ship, the one that said don't come, gets destroyed. I was like, oh my gosh, that Admiral. Well, it's not like Picard's going to get in trouble because the Admiral's dead, so he doesn't know.
Yeah, we've only sent one of them to the fleet as well, you know, just in case.
Right.
We didn't send a backup Admiral, like, you know, but anyway.
Yeah, it's the Admiral,
yeah,
right?
The one.
Exactly. Yeah. The other line that just, I kind of have to go like, through every time I watch this movie comes right at the very end of the film where they're kind of getting ready to head back to the 24th century. And it's a beautiful shot. You get this kind of one camera shot panning across the bridge and each character comes in, gives a report and leaves. And it's following Picard as he gets to the chair and then he orders them back to the 24th century. But Worf says, the moon's gravitational field obscured our warp signature. The Vulcans did not detect us. And I'm like, wait, they're in orbit of Earth. The moon's gravitational field obscured their warp signature. And then at the very end, when they go back through the temporal rift, they're like right above Montana and you can see them go through the rift in the night sky. And I'm like, wait, sorry. What? The moon?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I love how you're bringing these things up because, again, I remember hearing that every time I've seen the movie and just going like, yeah, whatever. But this was one of those ones where it was like, wait, I got to hear that again. I rewound it because I had to hear that one more time. And then I started thinking about, well, wait, you know, this is in our future when we're in Montana in this film. And I'm thinking, if the Enterprise were in orbit of Earth today, we would detect it, right? So I was thinking, I'm not even so worried about the Vulcans detecting the Enterprise there. What about the rest of Earth? Wasn't NASA and all these other agencies all picking up? There's a ship up there.
Post World War III, you never know. Maybe they were looking elsewhere. But I get your point, like 100%.
Nah, and I mean, they do find it with Zephram Cochrane's telescope. So, I mean, like somebody else could be seeing this.
It's like when you dissect it, like it gets to the point where it's just funny. It doesn't take away from the movie at all. Like, you know, like even the scene where you see the sphere shooting very slowly at tin shacks, you know, and making barely any damage is like, what yield are your torpedoes on? Like, you know, you didn't even destroy the bar, even though it got a direct hit. And it's like, yeah, it's funny, certain things, but again, it does not take away from any of the enjoyment that I would get out of the movie either at the same time. Just gives me a giggle.
Absolutely. That's the thing, is this film can get away with a lot of that because, like, let's just be frank, it's so darn good. Like, it's such a good story and so well done that these little kind of minor niggles, like you say, they're fun to laugh at and fun to kind of point out. But yeah, they don't take away from the story at all. I come away from this film satisfied every single time I watch it. And I've watched it, I don't know how many times at this point, but every time that music swells at the end and the camera pulls up from the Vulcan ship, I'm just grinning. Like, I love this film.
Really, Dan? Do you feel that way through the whole film? Because what happens to you when you hear Zephram Cochrane say you're on some kind of Star Trek?
Oh, I know, right?
That is one of the most cringe lines in all of Star Trek. And I understand the temptation to get the name of the franchise in for the first time, but I honestly think there's no better actor to try and pull it off than James Cromwell, because everything he says does sound natural, but boy, did they stretch it with that line. That's a tough one.
Yeah, on one of the bonus features I was watching, they were talking how they debated that one for a while. They said they sat on it for a while, just trying to, is this something we want to do? And then they played with the line just saying, what, are you on some kind of trek? And they were just going to go with Trek. And then they thought, and even Berman was on the fence about going Star Trek, but they decided to go with it, and they kept it in there. So, but it wasn't something they just, we'll put that in there, it'll be fine. They spent some time debating.
Yeah, I bet. And that makes sense that like this would be a hotly debated thing. I don't know that they made the right decision. I still kind of go a little every time I hear it. I think it is one of the most cringe fourth wall breaks, but they got it in there. It's famous for that. We're talking about it 25 years later, so maybe they made the right decision. I don't know.
It doesn't bother me. It kind of took me out the first time I saw it, but it's okay.
I remember the discussions when the movie first came out as to like what that line actually meant. And I think like it's meant, he's meaning a Star Trek as in a star trip, which is kind of silly. But there were people I remember online talking about like, does the television show Star Trek exist in the Star Trek future? Is he talking about having watched Star Trek as a kid and saying like, oh, these guys are kind of like that? And like, oh, no. Can of worms. Don't open that.
There's good uses of breaking the fourth wall, and this isn't one of them. But listen, it's kind of, it has somewhat kind of seasoned with time, because it's coming, and you're kind of going, oh, here comes the cheese. But as you said, the way it's delivered as well, because it's Oliver Cromwell, if anyone else is going to say it, it may come across even worse, but it is what it is. It's part of lore now.
Now I kind of wish when you see the scene of Zephyr Cochrane and Troy having drinks together that there's a TV in the background with TOS playing.
Those old scientists. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny when that moment came up in the film with the director's commentary. I was kind of looking forward to it. I wanted to hear kind of Jonathan Frakes talk a bit about that, but he was talking about some other story about filming on location and that sort of thing, and the hard work that entailed, and that kind of went over that line, so he never addressed it. And in retrospect, I'm thinking, was that on purpose? Was he just like, I don't want to talk about that?
100%, I'd say.
I don't know.
Yeah. Because it's such like, they really take their time with that single line. Like the way it's framed, and he delivers it slowly. So you're astronauts on some kind of Star Trek, So if he didn't say it in the director's commentary, I think we all kind of know why.
Yeah. The only thing I think that could have made it worse was if like there was some sort of acknowledgement afterwards, like they all exchanged knowing glances or like a little smirk or something. I'm really glad they didn't do that. Like they don't really react to it. They just say, listen, doctor, we're running out of time here. And they kind of move on from that. The one time the like knowing smirk that I actually really like in the movie is when they've achieved orbit and they're about to engage the warp drive, and Zephyr Cochrane says, engage! And Riker and Geordi look at each other and laugh. I was like, I like that. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't play up too much cheese with like Star Trek, and then later Riker's like, yeah, and your warp drive is going to create all these ships for generations to come, and there'll be one generation and then the next generation.
And so many voyages, into deep space. Yeah, they could have really went to town on that one.
I think we're all pretty agreed that this is a top tier film in the Star Trek franchise, and one of our favorites. I'm wondering, just kind of going around the room, are there any final thoughts about the film that we haven't talked about yet?
I suppose I just want to give massive kudos to the team and just the story of introducing the Phoenix and the fact that it was a Titan missile and it looked awesome, and just the detail and how it was used, it was tremendous. And the Borg Queen, Alice just was freaking amazing. I always kind of asked myself, would I have preferred some sort of kind of Landru type of, computer to be, behind the Borg? But listen, the hive mind, the Borg Queen, it was so good and creepy as hell, but yeah, they're the two other things.
Yeah, Alice Krieg's performance alongside Brent Spiner is definitely a highlight that we haven't really talked about. And those scenes, her first introduction, the first scene she's introduced, you don't see her. She's just a disembodied voice. And I don't know what it is about her delivery and how she does those lines, but they're so good. Like, brave words, just that's your first introduction to her. And you're like, what is that? What's happening? I love that. It's this great introduction to a really divisive character, I think, for a lot of fandom, but incredibly performed by Alice Krieg for sure.
I remember when this was coming out and hearing about the Borg Queen, I thought, okay, do we really need to have the main villain? Like, why can't it just be the Borg? But, I was like, well, we'll see how this is. And I really liked it because it just makes so much sense. The Borg is all about, we, it's not I. And then she introduces herself and she says, I am the Borg. And I thought, well, yeah, it makes sense. If the Borg are like bees, there's a hive mind, but there's always the queen bee. So this totally makes sense. And I love how she says, Picard, oh, you only think in 3 dimensions. It's like, why wasn't she destroyed in that other ship? Like, as if there's other parts of the Borg that just go beyond time and space. There's something even more mysterious about them. And so just adding the Borg Queen to it, I thought was a really nice element to just further enhance the Borg themselves. So I really enjoyed, even just her performance, I really enjoyed the idea of the Borg Queen.
Bruce, is there anything else with regards to the film that we haven't talked about yet?
I think the only thing that's coming up on the top of my head right now is the very last scene when the Vulcans land in Montana. And I can never watch that scene without thinking of In the Mirror Darkly.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
I don't know if that's a good or bad thing or not, but it's just, I can't help but think about it,
It's a thing. It's just a thing.
I think probably the biggest revelation from the director's commentary with Jonathan Frakes was that the idea of Zefram Cochrane shaking the Vulcan's hand instead of just returning the Vulcan salute was James Cromwell's idea. He said, like, hey, we should do, he does the Vulcan greeting, we should do the human greeting in reply. And that was all him, and just that camera move, and it's so much more meaningful, I think, than if he'd have just like returned the same symbol back, which was how the original script was, which I had no idea. I think that's brilliant.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I love you, even just that very last moment of them sitting there and he puts the music on and starts dancing. The Vulcans are like, what's going on? And I thought, yeah, and I also thought this is also, it really works well then later with Star Trek Enterprise, I just felt like this is a good connection even into that. The Vulcans are going to look at humans for a while and just be like, these people, I don't know if they can handle space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the look on the Vulcan ambassador's face is basically like, dear God, what have we done?
Right.
Undesirables. Yeah. Yeah. But, and like that scene where even like Zefram Cochrane tries to do the Vulcan salute, and we talked about how this movie is great for bringing in people who aren't really familiar with Trek, because again, like I remember when I was trying to do that for the first time, and if you meet a non-Trekkie and get them to try to do the Vulcan, they all struggle with it as well. And I just love when he kind of tries to do it and he's like, oh, screw this, hand shake out. I just love that. Yeah. Super happy that you mentioned that because I forgot about it.
It's such a human moment, which is, that's what Star Trek's all about. I love it. So yeah, here we are 25 years later, 25 years after it came out. We're still talking about this movie in such glowing terms. I think that's terrific and just such a great addition to the Star Trek universe. So I want to thank you guys so much for being here to talk about this. This is so much fun.
Thanks for having us. having me. Us, I say me. Like, yeah, I'm the Borg now. Thanks for having me on, and especially your 100th episode as well. Bravo to you two.
Oh, well, thank you. And
yeah.
It's really glad to have you on for it.
Yeah, it's been fun. Yeah, I'm glad you were here to join us. It was a fun conversation. I mean, what a great movie. It's definitely in my top 3, maybe, yeah, I'd say probably top 3 somewhere in there of Star Trek movies.
So, Damien, when you're not here talking First Contact with us, where can people find you and all the awesome things you do online?
So, yeah, listen, if you like starships and Trek and just shenanigans and stuff like that, come find me on YouTube for the most part. Just search for Irish Trekkie, all one word. And you'll also find me normally kind of skulking around on Twitter and Instagram as well. Surprise, surprise, under the moniker Irish Trekkie. So generally, if you search me, you'll find me there. So yeah, so come and say hello and get in the shippy conversation.
So the name The Irish Trekkie, does that mean there's only one Irish Trekkie that exists, or are you the Irish Trekkie?
The premier Irish Trekkie.
The premier Irish Trekkie. That means that when I went to put in Irish Trekkie, that was already used. I had to put in the Irish Trekkie. But it gives it a certain kind of professional tone to it. But yeah, do you know what I have enjoyed over the years, and by no means have I influenced anybody, but I love seeing people like, the Scottish Trekkie or the British Trekkie, and I've seen the German Trekkie as well. It's like, yeah, we're all kind of representing the global Trek market here, so yeah, it's been fun to be kind of monikered, that self-monikered. I put that name on myself, but yeah, I wear that badge proudly.
And so, Bruce, when you're not here talking about various countries' Trekkie representatives, where can we find you?
Well, I'm on Twitter. I'm not the Admiral Rex Trekkie. I'm just Admiral_Rex on Twitter. You can find me there. I'm also on Instagram at Admiral Rex. I'm occasionally on the Star Wars Report podcast. Been on a few episodes of Literary Treks lately, and I think that's about it. Of course, I'm always here, and I'm always hanging out in our Facebook group, Dan.
Excellent. Yeah, our Facebook group, the Positively Trek discussion group. Be sure to search that out, find it, and we'll let you in. Great discussions happening there. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at Kertrats. That's Kertrats. It's just Star Trek backwards. YouTube.com/Kertrats Productions. And yeah, find the podcast at Positively Trek on Twitter. PositivelyTrek@gmail.com if you want to get a hold of us. And thank you to William Smith, our associate producer. Thank you so much for helping us bring this episode to you. We'll see you all in the next episode. Until then, as always, stay positive.